From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome to the show. So over this past week, I found myself oddly drawn into that little movement to remember and somehow honor Mayor Jane Byrne. You know, you have to be over about 40 to have actual memory of her as mayor, but it's true that she's been almost completely forgotten, thanks in part to her successors, who almost never mentioned her and actively removed any images of her from physical remembrances or public appearances. So a piece of her still lives in the museum campus and Navy Pier. Those were two of her pet projects. She officially killed the Crosstown Expressway, which is something we kind of forget today, which would have essentially replaced Cicero Avenue with something resembling the Eisenhower. And then she got the feds to give her most of the money for other projects. And in January 1979, she announced that that money would be used to extend what's now the Blue Line out to O'Hare. She built or got started with building the Orange Line. It's hard to remember that until then, the L couldn't get you closer to O'Hare than Jefferson Park. And Midway, forget about it. So then there's this. She was Rahm Emanuel times 10. When she came into office, the school board was in crisis unlike anything we've recently seen. There was no money, physically, academically crumbling schools, runaway inflation, driving costs for police and fire services through the roof. Have you heard this before? Then she thought she could fight the unions to control the costs, but that just triggered 3 major strikes. And despite her status as an almost complete outsider, she had a vision for Chicago that really and truly we do benefit from today. She's reportedly pretty frail and been hidden pretty much from the public in recent years. And it's been about 35 years since she was elected after that dramatic 1979 winter. Remember that winter? Yeah, that was a good one. That was better than the polar vortex. So Governor Quinn has suggested that he wants to rebuild the Circle Interchange and name it for her. But me, I'm for Millennium Park. I think we all know it's being held eventually for becoming Richard M. Daley Park. But hey, why not just name it Janey Park right now? That's my opinion. So today, 2 people who cover the news very well in Chicago, although probably not Jane Byrne. I don't even know if Randi Belisomo was certainly not in the news business in 1979. That's for sure.
I was born during her term.
Were you really?
I was born
You're
during
a Janey girl. Well, anyway, Randi from WGN-TV, glad to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And our friend Alex Keefe from WBEZ, who checked his gun at the door and is ready to roll and tell us about all the important stuff that's going on.
Also born during the Jane Byrne administration.
Were you really?
Yeah.
No
I think.
kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, I started at your radio station in 1979 as news director and had the privilege of being the City Hall quote-unquote reporter, to the extent that the station had one at that point. And on like my second day, I thought I would ask a really provocative public radio type question about policy or something. So I just piped up and asked my little question. And she just kind of leaned over the podium and said, "Who are you?" And I gave her my name and she said, "And who do you work for?" And I told her, and she had obviously never heard of the station. And she just completely blew me off and then went back to probably Fran or whoever was there at the time. Anyway.
She quickly learned who you were.
You learned your lesson not to ask substantive questions at mayoral news conferences.
It was a lot of fun. But it was also an amazing, amazing time with all those strikes and you know. Anyway, so what do you think we should name for Jane Byrne?
Well, I think the Circle Interchange, this was Governor Pat Quinn's idea.
Yeah.
This whole crusade was started by Michael Sneed, who was a former press secretary to Jane Byrne for a very brief amount of time. And Governor Pat Quinn came out this week saying the Circle Interchange would be good. And I just, as a driver, I have zero fondness for the Circle Interchange.
It's one of the most hated places in Chicago.
I never think of anything good with it. It's
Negative
never not crowded.
Why don't we just name a waste transfer station or something?
But I think to his credit, the governor's idea was that Chicagoans would be hearing this name with some regularity.
Right.
But I mean,
it's
I take
55 minutes to the Burn.
Right. But I take heartburn medication every day. It doesn't breed fondness because it happens on a regular basis. Like maybe Navy Pier, the ball got rolling on revitalizing Navy Pier under her tenure. Also, some of the things that it seems like Mayor Richard M. Daley sort of salted the earth with. Vietnam War Memorial, there were some other monuments that she put up, but the Circle Interchange, there's just no upside to Circle Interchange. It's a terrible place.
I absolutely think she should be honored, just of the significance of what she did. No matter what Barack Obama's legacy is, he will be honored for being the first African American, and she should be honored for being the first woman. I think that 2014, we don't think about it enough, the progress that women have made in the past 50 years. I think that has been the most significant civil rights achievement, and certainly the last generation women go to work, women have leadership positions, and this has all happened in about half a century, and she was one of the first. And if you think about other movements that have had so much progress, I think, look at this same-sex marriage movement, the movement for gay equality, and how she was the first mayor to recognize Pride Week and to march in the parade.
That's a very good point.
I think that she would be welcome. Some sort of monument to her would be welcomed on the Northside Lakeview Boys Town area, because she was a first, and she's dealing with a population that was struggling for equal rights as well. I think that that would be an appropriate honor, one of perhaps a few. But if Michael Blandick has a building named after him, why, the person who defeated him certainly should too. So. Here's to
and there's the Harold Washington Library, and you know,
maybe a festival. I mean, she oversaw this proliferation of fests.
She
you know,
sure did.
Chicago Fest got off the ground. Jazz Fest. Maybe there's a Burn Fest. I don't know what it would be. I don't know what the Burn Fest would be. But you know, there are parts. Somebody also mentioned Cabrini Green, and my recollection when I've talked with people, you were around during that time, was that was her whole Cabrini Green stay was received. With mixed ways,
cynicism.
I guess, with a little cynicism. So that might be like another Circle Interchange idea. But certainly something for the only Chicago female mayor since then, the only in the history of the city.
All right. Well, anyway, so we won't resolve that, but I think we're all agreed that there is some movement afoot to try to do something for her, and I think that's a good thing.
And hopefully while she's still alive.
Wouldn't that be
It
nice?
would be so nice. I know that these memorials are ready and obituaries are ready because we know that she's been in ill health, but we too often wait too long to show people that they're appreciated.
So, what's important this week? I always love it when I have guys like you on, because I don't have to take the lead. I got like 3 talk show hosts sitting at the table. What do you think? Minimum wage, gun shops,
minimum wage is interesting. I think there's still some sort of. I think right now we're still kind of feeling the fallout of all the things that did not happen in Springfield at the end of last week when the General Assembly adjourned for the summer. They're not due back until I think late November after the election, which is a little convenient. But they did pass a budget. They did not pass Governor Quinn's permanent income tax hike. You know, right now the personal income tax rate is at 5%. It's supposed to go down to 3.75. He wanted to keep it at 5%. He said it could be a few $1 billion in a deficit. So right now the deficit's there. The General Assembly did not pass that. He didn't get his $10 minimum wage, which he had been looking for. He didn't get these $500, I think they're calling them real estate property tax rebates for people, which has been a pillar of his campaign. He also, we haven't seen any action on Chicago pensions yet. He has until Monday to sign a pension bill. So right now there's a lot of stuff.
If he doesn't sign that, it becomes law automatically, though, isn't that correct?
Right.
What's going to happen?
Right. I have no idea what is going to happen. Although I think if you think about this logically, it would seem that the governor maybe is going to mandatorily veto it because, listen, in the last couple of days, so the way it works versus the federal system is that if he does nothing, it becomes law, right? The federal system, if he does nothing, it's a pocket veto and it's vetoed. And the governor has said he's going to do something on Monday. Well, if he's going to do something, he's voiced enough concerns that it would seem strange for him to just straight out sign it, although that could conceivably happen. But maybe he's going to mandatorily veto it. He's had a lot of concerns about the fact that Mayor Rahm Emanuel wants to use a property tax hike to pay for this at a time when Quinn's campaigning on the fact that he wants to ease the property tax burden on people. So what happens, I'm not exactly sure. I have not heard anything hard from sources or from the governor's office, but maybe tries to limit the property, some language around property taxes that was stripped from the bill originally. But it seems like he's going to do something, and if he says he's going to do something, it seems like the something he would do, if I had to guess out of my hat, it would be some kind of an amendatory veto, but I don't know what the changes are.
I got to say that the only thing that seems common to all of this is that every single one of them is trying desperately to just sweep it under the rug until after November, if they can possibly. But of course, that's what happens. There's an election every couple of years, so it's always happening. But I mean, wouldn't you like to be Bruce Rauner's campaign right now, to be going after Quinn and saying, this guy has a super majority in both houses. He's a Democrat. He can't even get this through. I mean,
and that's why he was put on this earth, Ken. He'll tell you that.
That's right. He was put on this earth to fix the pension problem.
It's not working out. And I'm interested, because you cover this more regularly, is the city council's role in all of this. That things have to fall on the city council, and they have to go along with the mayor.
Right.
But they're also up for election.
Right, in February, so this pushes things back a little bit, February of
Right.
2015. Right. The mayor was on WTTW last night, and he said that basically he was going to be working the city council, but he was open to ideas aside from a property tax hike. It's unclear what those ideas are. You know, some unions have come out with ideas like a tax on financial transactions at the big exchanges in town, or a commuter tax for people who work in the city but live somewhere else. The mayor's administration has shot those ideas down. So it's unclear what ideas he's open to, but he says he's open to other ideas. And aldermen are skeptical of passing a property tax increase months before they have to go up for re-election.
The least popular thing they could do.
The least popular, right. Aside from taxing dogs or candy or babies or something like that. Right.
Might be worse.
Right. and the knowledge that it's just the first of probably several others that have to come. This is just one increase for just one pension.
It took a long time for us to get here.
Right, and that's a good point that you make, because this bill that may or may not get the governor's signature or some action on Monday only affects the pension funds for laborers and municipal workers. Police and fire pension funds in Chicago have gigantic problems. Those are still unsolved. The Chicago Teachers Pension Fund has a gigantic problem that is still unsolved, and they still have to find revenue to deal with all of this stuff.
Yeah, we've talked about it so many times here, and the more I talk about it, the more just completely flummoxed I become by it, because we had people sitting around the table a couple weeks ago from the pension funds, from fire, police, and teachers, and you know, they make such a compelling argument that throughout all of this, they continued to put their money in, and they had a contract, and the contract was signed by the people of Illinois through their representatives, and now all of a sudden, because you didn't pay the money and the pension systems are unfunded, that's got to be our problem? Why, you know? So.
Right. And the pension funds, you know, their job is to make sure that the pension funds are healthy. They're sort of non-combatants here. But let's keep in mind that these systems that have screwed up Chicago pensions have been in place for decades. People could have changed them. Mayors could have changed them. Union leaders could have said, hey, we see 30 years down the road this is going to be a problem. But they've been around for a very, very long time.
And yet, as you pointed out in that very good piece you did with the fire folks, the multiplier has been screwed up for, well,
70
more than
years,
decades,
80 years. I mean, a very, very long time.
And there are these letters from the fire fund from 1920 something.
Yeah, people have been complaining about it for a long time. And when you look back at that history, everybody's to blame a little bit. You can't just put it on one thing. I mean, I know we're in the moment, but I think it's important to keep in mind that people knew this was screwed up for a long time, and they could have changed it, and nobody did.
And the dissatisfaction among voters, even if you're not directly affected, if you don't have a pension coming, I think the promises that this was going to be resolved for several months, years now, that it's going to be a throw the bombs out mentality, that they can't solve this one thing, and this is the one thing that they have to do.
So
it's
then
and I know Mayor Emanuel met with one of the credit houses when he was in New York this week, meeting with Jimmy Fallon. One of the, I mean, what it is has just had terrible implications for our state's economy that expands beyond just people who are collecting a pension.
And, you know, to go back to the politics angle again, it's like, there is some concern about the fact that Bruce Rauner is not saying anything about what his plan is. But I would say it's just brilliant campaigning, because all he has to say is, everything's screwed up, I can fix it. And that's it. You know?
Political science 101 is you run on the incumbent's record
That's
for a little while. Why would he put his plan out there to get it?
Put me in there, I'll fix it.
Keep your mouth closed, and he will go on to be elected.
Right.
If if things remain the same as they are now.
Right, and then we'll all be sitting here 3 or 4 years from now talking about how Governor Rauner hasn't done much about it. Right, complaining.
Ineffective Governor Rauner.
If any of us still have jobs, because maybe we'll all be in line for. Anyway, we did touch a little bit on this minimum wage thing, which is what we're talking about here. But Al, I'm curious about how we ended up with a minimum wage. What are they calling it? A commission? A task force? I mean,
I don't know whether it's blue ribbon though.
I've been around Chicago. I've been around Chicago a long time. I've followed politics for a long time. Usually, we don't get that democratic about things unless it's something that we want to kill with bureaucracy. So, is that what this is? Are we putting in a commission on this just to make sure it doesn't happen?
I don't know the genesis of this, but I would say the mayor is a guy who often gets what he wants, and it seems like he has some ideas to push for this. He's been on the record saying he thinks that the minimum wage should be increased. Now, how much and how that is structured and whatever, that's up for debate. But even when he formed this task force, and keep in mind, this doesn't happen a lot with big pieces of legislation. Usually we kind of see it at the last minute.
Like Obama High School.
Right, exactly. Kind of see it at the last minute and then it just gets crammed through the city council. So it indicates that maybe he's trying to be more democratic or taking this more seriously. I don't know. But he came up, when he formed this, he had some specific ideas. From the press release I'm quoting, he wanted all minimum wage employees to get an increase in the short term, to have cost of living increases tied to future increases of inflation, to cover tipped employees. So there is some specificity with which he's coming to this thing, which makes me think, as an observer, like, well, he has some ideas. It's not just something that he's going to bury.
No, the minimum wage is going up. It's a matter of how much, because if you look at the members of the minimum wage task force, we talk about democracy and representing, but it's very heavily populated by people who would be very much in favor of a hike of the minimum wage, very liberal aldermen, union leaders, and even the members that represent commercial interests who you would think weren't as favorable on this issue. Teresa Mental, who's the CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, well, she was the former chief of staff of Mayor Emanuel, and Sam Toya, who's the president of the Illinois Restaurant Association. He is very well documented as being in favor of seemingly left causes. So I think the minimum wage will be going up, probably a phase-in program over the next 5 to 7 years, like we saw in Seattle this week. They have until 2017 to raise the minimum wage from $7. Well, it was already above the minimum wage in Seattle. The federal minimum was $7.25. It was 9 something in Washington State. Now it's going up to $15 over the next 5 years. And where does the number originate from? I think that was a concern of many commercial interests. Just a pie in the sky number. We saw these numbers on the placards of protesters for months now. $15 an hour, $15 an hour. Now we're actually seeing $15 an hour in Seattle.
So then there is some logic for having this extra process in between, because it does help insulate them maybe from the business interests who are going to say, you just sprang this on us, and no, well, actually we had a long process.
Smart politics by the mayor to put that buffer in between, and the first public hearing is on Monday, 6 or 7 o'clock at Kennedy King College. There'll be 4 public hearings after that, and then they're expecting to have a vote on this by soon, this fall at least. There's going to be a referendum on the Illinois ballot.
I'm pretty sure, by the way, we'll be carrying that live here on CAN TV. So check your listings on that one. So I got to tell you, I was also really intrigued this week about this thing about WGN Radio losing the Cubs. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know. I don't believe,
they go together.
I don't believe I've ever actually listened to an entire Cubs broadcast on WGN in my life. But there's something comforting about knowing that it's there. It's like it's the world's greatest newspaper's voice of Chicago radio station. That's the way it should be, right? So, I mean, obviously it's a business decision and probably a good business decision, but you work at WGN.
I've always put the two together, and I think it's significant for the Cubs because WGN's radio band length is enormous throughout the Midwest, and that has been the station that you turn to, and I associate the two together, and I think that it is one more sign of the changing Tribune Company. We no longer carry many newscasts nationally, and we might not be affiliated with the Cubs in the television realm as well. Yeah. And I think everything is up in the air. We're no longer carrying sports nationally, the Bulls and the Blackhawks. And I think that this says a lot about the Tribune Company, and I think that the implications will be huge for the Cubs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like Jimmy DeCastro just made a real, honest-to-God business decision. He just said, this is costing, I mean, I like the quote that he gave, who was it? Forget, it was in the Sun-Times, I think, today, but I mean, I'm grossly misquoting him, but essentially he said, you know, we're just tired of losing the amount of money that we're losing on the Cubs, and I just don't understand why WBEM or CBS is willing to lose even more, but hey, good luck to them.
I don't get it, and if you think about the TV, if that was what happens to TV, that is why the Cubs have a national fan base like the Braves and TBS. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, watching the Cubs and Andre Dawson and Greg Maddux, and I became a fan, and I was 500 miles away, 600 miles away, and this could be huge for the team.
Well, it does. I mean, it does really raise a very interesting question, because a huge part of that phenomenon that we've all lived with for the last 30, 40 years of this losing team that can always fill the stands every single day.
That's why.
A huge part of that is because people come to Chicago to go to Wrigley Field and see the Cubs.
It's a tourist. You could hear it all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder about the long-term effects of it. In full disclosure, I'm not a Cubs fan. I'm not a big baseball fan. But I did grow up in Chicagoland, and I did grow up in a radio family. So the Cubs are synonymous with WGN, and you could turn on 720 if you're in Manitoba, and as long as the skies are clear, you can hear a Cubs game. And I think that's why you get a lot of people going up to Wrigleyville to go see these Cubs. It's just it seems to be the end of an era at the very least, and it'll be interesting to see how it affects things in the long term.
Well, also just as media creatures, oops, that's a patented name. I'm not supposed to use that. As creatures of the media. It just seems weird to me that this radio station that keeps billing itself as all news all the time is more and more becoming all sports all the time. And they have a sports radio station, but that's jammed up with sports. So it's like, you know, News Radio 780, news whenever there's not a Cubs game.
Right. If
or
you
Bears
think
game.
that's where you go for news. I think that the window is just open for maybe another model of news radio 24 hours a day is emerging if we're going to be having 4 hours of baseball every day.
Yeah.
We'll see. The other one didn't work out.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've talked on this about Rivet Radio and these other kinds of things where you can just have it on your device and listen to what you want to listen to when you want to. So there's a new model for that too. Let's see, what do I have on my list here? The Lucas Museum, of course. The Lucas Museum. Okay. All right. Forever open, clear, and free, except for museums put there by really, really rich guys if they decide that they want to close a parking lot and build a museum on top of that. I think that's what A. Montgomery Ward said, wasn't it, back in
about the lakefront?
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be, but I don't know. I'm a Star Wars fan. I have not done a lot of reporting on this story, so I'm not familiar with it. But it also seems like San Francisco has a pretty big thing going as far as views of whatever body of water is in San Francisco. It's not a lake, I know that.
I think it's some kind of an ocean or something, isn't
right,
it?
but
Pacific. Don't ask us for Midwestern.
The Presidio. Yeah, boy,
it might be the
is
Pacific.
Chicago Newsroom. We don't know anything about San Francisco.
Center of the country.
But I'll tell you what, as Chicagoans, we know when we're being played.
Right.
And we're being
we
played,
might be being played.
Right, by San
Lucas
Francisco
might be
here.
playing, but you think that, well, maybe it makes sense. His wife is here, Melody Hobson. This is his new home, and he's given bajillions of dollars, the very scientific, to local charities, that he has an interest in building up Chicago and has a relationship with the mayor, but it's hard to tell. And I think I've sat through Star Wars things, but it's not my first choice, but there's more to this museum than just that. He has a huge collection of Norman Rockwell paintings and other American icons. So it would be a real boon to the city, and that's not an area that people go to right now.
The parking lots at
the
Soldier
parking
Field,
lot,
right? Not
exactly.
a great tourist.
do on Bears Sundays.
wasteland.
They go there,
Right.
Drink beer in your van or something.
But
like
that could be something that it could be put to good use and expand the lakefront.
But as has also been pointed out by Deanna Isaacs over at the Reader, and I think Neil over at the Reader, Neil Steinberg, they've pointed out that, you know, I forget what it is, it's 40,000 objects or something he's going to have in the museum, but, you know, 50 of them are these Norman Rockwell paintings, and the others are plastic lightsabers. I mean, that's probably cruel, but there is a real issue about whether or not a museum like that would remain vibrant and relevant 10 years down the road, 20, 30 years. It's not like the Adler or the.
Right.
Am I wrong about that?
Are you putting the Star Wars legacy up against the legacy of the actual universe? As a Star Wars fan, I would advocate for the Star Wars legacy.
Yeah. And there are generations of Star Wars fans now raising their sons to be Star Wars fans, but do we know if that will grab? And there's no more movies. I mean, the movies are done.
Well,
There's a new movie.
Disney took them over, right?
Are you serious?
Well, anyway.
There's going to be a new
Take
movie.
me off the conversation.
All right. Okay.
He's done things aside from Star Wars. I couldn't name a single one of them. But there are other things, Norman Rockwell paintings and other things that he's done that might be in the museum.
Oh, God. There goes our chance of getting George Lucas to fund Chicago Newsroom. It's over. Well, anyway, thanks for trying. You guys both this week covered a story that I thought was really kind of an old story, the actual day that same-gender marriage became legal in Illinois. And I thought, it's not that big a story. The story was when the law was passed. But you guys got to meet some really interesting people, and you both put very human faces on this thing. So
thank you. Impressions where I thought I got the assignment, I said, not only is this a 6-month-old story, the Monday was the day after that it actually happened, but most collar counties opened their offices to change civil unions to marriage, certificates of marriage, and this was significant, and I said, well, okay, and now there are only 400 couples in DuPage County that were in recognized civil unions. So there are only 400 couples that, if they wanted to, could change. And we thought that there would be a crowd. There was not a crowd, but there were several couples who were in line to do that, stressing the importance to me of, I wanted to do this at home. I wanted DuPage County to recognize my marriage. This is where we live, work, have our neighbors, are part of the fabric of the community. And I guess I had never really appreciated that until they told me that. And I got it, that this was their home. And when you think of DuPage County, you don't think of it being a bastion of liberal thought. And they were so proud that their community now recognizes what they have been all along.
Yeah, I spoke with a lesbian couple who had been together for 13 or 14 years, who had been going to the DuPage County Clerk's office every Valentine's Day for the last 6 or 7 years asking for a marriage license. And of course every year they get turned away because it's illegal. But they said it's really important for us to be able to do this in the county in which we live. So that was illuminating. I also think that there was a lot of silence that day from a lot of the groups who had opposed this. They seemed to be sort of staying quiet. But I do think going forward there's some important legal things that I'll be looking for with this. I know that a lot of the groups who oppose this have been talking about concerns of religious freedom and whether people had a right of conscience to sort of somehow make themselves not a part of a gay marriage if they didn't want to be part of one, if you own a business or something like that. So I think that'll be something to watch going forward to see if these concerns were founded. We have seen that in other places like New Mexico, I think Washington State. They've had some lawsuits where business owners have gotten in trouble for not doing this. So that's one thing to look at going forward. But other than that, it seemed to be going smoothly. I mean, it was just, as one person put it to me, it was extraordinary how ordinary it went.
Was. Yeah. And it's becoming more ordinary all the time. And something that you guys reported that I found really fascinating that I had not known is that if you've had 8 years of civil union and you get your marriage certificate, it's dated from the date of your civil union. So you've been married for 8 years.
And it was so important for the couples to recognize that date. They say with gay relationships you have so many dates. When you met, it's not when you got married. They just want one.
They just want
date.
one date, right? Yeah.
And they got it on Monday.
Thank you so much, guys. We've ripped through another half an hour here sitting and talking. Randi Belisomo from Channel 9, WGN-TV News. Glad to have you back again. I hope you'll come back many, many more times. And Al Keefe, you can come back too if you want.
Yeah, maybe I will.
Always glad to have Al Keefe, political reporter for WBEZ, the mighty 91.5. And you have been watching Chicago Newsroom, which is a presentation of CAN TV. Don't forget to watch that minimum wage thing on Monday night, yeah. You can find us here on cable, but you can also see us online at this very address right here, because that's where you can watch us on YouTube. And please do that, okay? We're also on iTunes. I'm Ken Davis. We'll be back next week, whether you like it or not. We'll be back next week, and we hope you'll watch. Thanks. Bye.